This is episode 539 on the 27th of June 2022, the final week of June 2022 as we march towards a milestone episode. Sports athletes are always under scrutiny from the time they make their debut to the time till their last match. Their performances, the way they perform, how many matches lost or won, everything is kept under a logbook. And then they often find themselves in situations which are difficult to explain. What does that mean? It means that sports athletes are expected to perform 1000%. Remember this, sports athletes are expected to perform 1000% at all times, which means they cannot afford to be lax. Whether it's the overhyped duo of Djokovic and Nadal, and because they have won so many championships in the past, they're expected to win a championship in the coming tournaments. So if Nadal won the French Open, he is expected to continue the same performance as far as the England Open or Wimbledon is concerned. Though injuries play a huge role in a sports athlete's career, that is not supposed to be an impediment. And then what happens? As I said, sports athletes are expected to perform at 1000%, which means if you are in a team game, the team is supposed to win. You're supposed to contribute every time, whether it's football, hockey, basketball, tennis in a doubles tournament, cricket, obviously all the individuals involved, all the 11 players and the 5 substitutes on the bench, the bench staff, the staff sitting in the dugout, they're expected that their wards will perform at 100% at all times. But what does that mean? Why do we expect them to perform 1000% at all times? Because we pay for the tickets. Athletes are sponsored by their own governing bodies. They have separate contractual agreements with separate sponsors. They endorse products, which means cash flow at most times is not an issue for an athlete in the 21st century. What does that lead to? Since we expect them to perform 1000% at all times, failure is no. Well, of course, one team will lose, the other one will win, that's fine. But we expect that if there are two teams or two players, one of them will be obviously be at a higher pedestal than the other one. So if yesterday it was Ireland versus India, Ireland was expected to be given a thorough beating. As I said, What is Ireland to cricket? What is Scotland to cricket? What is Netherlands to cricket? Is India to football. So India as a supposed powerful team which has been doing the job over the past 100 years is expected to beat Ireland. There are times when teams like Ireland can surprise you by beating you, but those come once in a blue moon. Therefore, failures are no in a world that awards them through cash and cash. They receive sponsorships. Their own governing body spends a fortune on them, on their training, on their injury rehabilitation, on their accommodation, staying in hotels which most individuals would not be able to afford on their own salary. So there's expectation from the governing body to perform it 1,000 times. There's expectation from the PPED media to perform it 100 times. There's expectation from their own teammates to perform at 1,000%. There's expectation from the fanatics who pay a fortune for the ticket. If there are 17,000 people in an arena, in a stadium, and they've all paid a certain amount for the ticket, then you obviously want a return by winning. And that's what the England team is doing against New Zealand. New Zealand has not been able to perform at their 1,000% because England have come up with a better plan. But as I said, their ruthless aggression going at over 4.5-5 runs per over, adopting the 50 over and 20 over template into the 5-day game, I'm not surprised by it. Of course, we put ourselves in a cocoon and expect that you are supposed to compartmentalize certain formats at certain times, and when these formats clash through means, then what happens? Well, we'll know that very soon. But does the change of management, the coach, the captain bring about a change in the team? Maybe it does. What we see on the field may be a result of months of hard work behind the scenes by the team management. But anyways, failures are a no in a world that awards them through cash and cash. But when two individuals or two teams face off each other, and even if they are at a level which is equal, and it's difficult to say which team will have a higher chance of winning this particular tournament, we tend to put our money in a team which is not our home team. So if it's India versus New Zealand, the PPED media might just put their bets on New Zealand. Why? Because they know India performs, but history says that India doesn't perform well against New Zealand. And these are some of the things which put athletes under pressure. So with failures at a no level, expected to perform at 1,000% at all times, with sponsorship deals and being made sure that the athletes are comfortable and they focus on the game, what does it mean further for these athletes? Then comes something which can have a negative effect. So 3 things in sports can impact an athlete's career: doping, injuries, and contracting the imaginary virus. Let's look at all 3 of them separately. Doping means taking a substance which is banned by a world body, in this case WADA and NADA, which means performance enhancing drugs as the term goes. But the question is, why do athletes dope? Because they're expected to perform 1000% at all times. So fatigue is not part of this performance. Then failures are a no-no. Therefore, the doping thing comes into play. Of course, when an athlete is caught in a doping situation, what do? We ban him or her for a certain period of time, the governing body trying to make an example out of that don't do this. But the question is, who decides which particular substance is banned and which is acceptable? And if the athlete has somehow consumed that banned substance, how did it land with the athlete? How were the coaches, the management not able to deal with the situation where the athlete or someone near him was able to procure this particular substance? That baffles me. It's not about the doping, it's everything surrounding it. And then comes injuries. Athletes can be injured anytime. It has nothing to do with fitness. So in a football match, if the athlete sometimes while trying to kick the ball and then running, they can come into a clash with their opponent. It can happen. It happens in hockey. It happens in other sports. You can slip. You cannot control that. There are some things which are what one calls the uncontrollable injuries happen. Of course, no one wants to be injured. But why do we associate injuries with fitness? You can injure any part of your body, external, internal, superficial, and then we judge them harshly. So if an athlete is caught in doping, we say, the irony is that we are the ones who want the athlete to perform at 1000% at all times. Failures are a no-no. They come under pressure. They somehow take some substance. Why? Well, that's a question which has never been answered. Then they are banned or not allowed to compete in a tournament. Then the PPE, the media goes after them. Look, what kind of examples are the athletes setting by using substances? You only force the athlete to use a substance. Nobody wants to do it. Of course, everything is a publicity stunt. That's what goes on in our head. And let's not say that maybe 30 years ago there was no doping. Athletes have been doping forever. It's just that which substance is allowed by the world governing body, which substance is not allowed, and how is that decided, I have never come to know. But they are tested at a moment's notice and they get the notice. Then over the past couple of years, the imaginary virus has become a part of an athlete's nightmare. Despite all the protections taken, all the bio bubbles and all those things, of course the bio bubbles have been given a leeway right now. There is no restrictions on the movement of athletes, but they can catch the imaginary virus anytime. How they do that, I don't know, and why one individual does it and how suddenly everyone catches it. The irony is that even when there were restrictive measures on the same athletes, they would still contract the imaginary virus. Right now, the governing bodies all over the world have decided we will not let athletes be affected by this restricted movement. So we will open the door a little and slowly just leave it ajar. The athletes get the virus. Then what happens? Contracting the virus means you are done for at least a week. You will recover in a week, which means if an individual catches the virus now and their next match is scheduled for Sunday, by Sunday they won't be able to recover. It depends on what kind of protocols the two governing bodies have agreed to and whether if the athlete recovers before the match, Will he be fit enough, not in terms of imaginary virus, but other things to compete? Will he be cleared to compete? Those are the questions which everyone has to answer. And then winning and losing, as I said, you expect the athletes to perform at 1000% at all times. They give it their all, yet they may end up on the losing side. The winning athlete may not do much. The winning athlete may take advantage of their opponent's weaker moments and take advantage of that and win the match, but it doesn't matter whether the losing athlete performs at 2000% and the winning athlete performs at 500%. It doesn't matter, because the winning athlete gets all the accolade, gets all the gold, gets all the attention, gets all the knighthood and everything. So it doesn't really matter. But these are the examples where they are judged. And who are they judged by? They're harshly judged by former players who themselves were misfiring and a plague. So former players who themselves had a very bleak career. Not everybody in the commentary box in most sports has performed at the highest level and has done well. Most of the individuals in the commentary box in most sports were what we call middling individuals. But the moment they get a mic, they're on the other side, all empathy, all sympathy goes away, and then they're harshly judged. For example, in cricket, a misfield, the ball comes to the fielder, it bounces and goes away, the batters take a single. Oh no, misfield. Or they drop a catch. The irony is that those who talk about dropping a catch may have never taken one in their life, but because they are now with the microphone and they have the freedom of expression, literally the First Amendment, they can say what they want, they won't be censored. They are allowed to do that by the broadcasters and nobody questions them. And then we also do that. We add to this by calling them experts, by getting in their head. It gets to their head. I am an expert. Whatever I say is the final word. So I have the right to harshly judge these players who are performing. So if a player does well but gets out in cricket or in hockey, you miss the penalty shootout. How can they miss the penalty shootout? It can be by an inch or something else, but how can they miss the penalty shootout? No. Perform at 1000%. Failures are a no. Injuries, doping, imaginary virus, getting caught in this web is seen in a negative light always. Maybe right now the imaginary virus situation is that we are still not seeing them in a negative light, but going further they will ask, why has the bio bubble thing been made thin? Why is the door left open ajar? We'll see that. But injuries, you can be injured anytime. But injuries to one player means opportunity for the other. And then the player who is injured, how long will that player take to recover? And even if they are back in the team, will they be immediately back in the 11? Or will they be sitting on the bench because their replacements have done well in that period? That's something the athletes have to deal with. But being judged by former players, as I said, not every former player had a stellar career. Those who had a stellar career moved to administrations and coaching. Those who were never going to be administrators or coaches because they don't have that kind of talent and knowledge became commentators. And once they became commentators and writers in newspapers and PPED media, they are given that freedom of expression with no restrictions. Say what you want. It doesn't matter. The broadcaster will not fire you unless your contract expires or something else happens. But adding to this, not only do former players judge them harshly, judged, not evaluated. The term is judged. They're also judged by a group who have never played the game. That is the journalist side of it. They have never played the game. Even if they did it in some school days, which doesn't count. I also played in school days, so you can also call me a semi-professional cricketer. They have never played the game, but they write in a way as if they're questioning the tactics and logic of the team, of the coaching staff, whatever be the sport, why they didn't have this player in the limelight, why these players were selected, why was this player on the bench. They behave as if they know more than the players, more than the actual individuals performing in the middle, and know everything, and with it comes selective bias towards a sport and individual athletes. We see this bias towards a sport that is English football, European football, preferred over Indian football, all the hype around European football or football from other countries, individual athletes, obsession around Djokovic and Nadal, it never goes away, it stays there. They're obsessed. Djokovic faces Nadal, two of the greatest, I'm tired of hearing this. They're not, but maybe. And then bias towards a sport. Let's take the example of women's cricket. The women's cricket match is happening parallelly to the men's tournament, but the women's match is not being televised anywhere, maybe at the local level. So those who are there at the ground are able to see it and do the job. Those who are not at the ground, there is no way to watch. It's not on the cable networks, it's not on the digital network, it's not on any obscure digital network, it's nowhere. Where the only individuals who are able to call the game are the ones sitting in the actual ground, so they have some access to it. Those who don't have, there you go. So the Indian men's team gets 70% of the page, the football team gets 5% of the page, the hockey team may get 10% of the page, that leaves 15%. You can divide that, and then the women's team, whether it's hockey or cricket, get 5% of the covering. Just a small snippet. Indian team beats their opponents, that's it. No big huge coverage. And then once again, towards a sport or a tournament, the Olympics. We are obsessed with the Olympics. As I said last year, there's nothing special about the Olympics, but we hype it. Then the Asian Games has been postponed due to whatever reasons, it really doesn't matter. And then another huge tournament we are obsessed with is, of course, the individual tournaments. Of course, the French Open, the Australian Open, the Wimbledon Open, the US Open. We are obsessed with it despite it being a private tournament. And then, of course, the Commonwealth Games due later this year. The gold expectations in a Commonwealth Game tournament. So athletes are not only judged by former players who themselves were misfiring and a plague. Athletes are judged by a group who have never played the game but behaved as if they know more than the players and know everything, and with it comes selective bias towards a sport and individual athletes. Moving on, yesterday's game against Ireland, as I said, did they exceed expectations? Maybe they did. And in the end, the Ireland-India tournament happened. It was affected by rain. By the time it started, it was already too late to even have a look because it was going late into midnight and there's no use going there. So what did they do? They had a 10-12 over match in which Ireland made 108 for 4, a good performance considering whom are they playing against, and India, they made 3 for 111. They did some experiments because this whole Island India tournament is experimental. Only 2 matches. Who will be selected from this group? One doesn't know. Who will be on the periphery? Maybe everyone. You can only take 17, 18 individuals to the World Cup. So whoever are there in that pool of 30 plus, 17 will go, 13 will miss out. There will be few more in the periphery. Who knows what the hollow mind of the hollow selectors is thinking. So this ends episode number 539 on the 27th of June 2022. Stay tuned for the next episode number 540 on the 29th of June 2022 as we come to the end of June 2022 and march towards a milestone episode.